A new task force set up in response to sweeping U.S. tariffs has outlined its strategies to tackle the challenges facing Singapore. Deputy Prime Minister Gan Kim Yong is chairing the group. Other task force members include cabinet ministers and representatives from two federations and the labour movement. Let's take a look at how it will support businesses and workers. Now, the first area will focus on establishing regular three-way communications between the government, businesses and workers. It will also include updates on the latest developments and assessments on their impact. This is led by Digital Development and Information Minister Josephine Teo and Singapore Business Federation Chairman Lim Ming Yan. Now, the second area will identify pain points and immediate challenges faced by businesses and workers. These will shape the review of support measures and enhancements if needed. President of the Singapore National Employers Federation, Tan Hee Teck, is co-leading the second workstream with Manpower Minister Tan See Leng and Labour Chief Ng Chee Meng. Mr. Ng has urged employers to continue building up their workforce capabilities.
We have worked well with SNEF and companies, and we therefore now hope to deepen this relationship and hope that companies in such an environment can take a more flexible approach in measures other than retrenchment to preserve talent and strengthen future capabilities. For companies, we will continue to encourage management to support their employees in reskilling and upskilling efforts.
Beyond immediate support, the group will draw up medium to longer term strategies, and they include exploring new and innovative ways to enter and grow in new markets. The move aims to reinforce Singapore's status as a global hub in air, sea, trade and finance. It will also look to strengthen global partnerships. National Development Minister Desmond Lee will co-lead the third work stream with Transport Minister Chee Hong Tat.
Our goal is, first, to create good jobs and good wages and help Singaporeans access these jobs in a very different global environment, to grow competitive and innovative enterprises that are rooted in Singapore but who can excel overseas, and thirdly, to foster an enabling environment where good businesses and Singaporeans are proud to call home.
We are facing the most serious challenge to the global rules-based economic order. We must be prepared for a more protectionist, unstable, and fragmented world ahead. But by working together with our unions and businesses, the government will help our companies and our workers navigate these choppy waters in front of us.
And here to share more is Dr. Goh Jing Rong, Assistant Professor of Economics at the Singapore Management University. Also joining us is Taimur Beg, Chief Economist at DBS. Welcome, gentlemen. So my first question would be to you, Mr. Beg. How has the constant changes to the U.S. tariffs playbook impacted Singapore's economy?
I think the near-term impact is one of paralysis. There is so much uncertainty out there that it's really hard to make business decisions for the near term or, for that matter, medium term. Deals that made sense yesterday do not make sense today in the fog of uncertainty. So what we will probably see is a postponement of capital formation, cancellation of certain deals which may not make any sense anymore given the wall of tariff and the fragmentation dynamic at place. So this poses downside to investment, new job creation, and perhaps even consumption, because consumers are also watching what's happening in the world, and they're affected by the uncertainty as much as the businesses are affected by it right now.
And we know that the U.S. president has announced a 90-day pause on the tariff hikes. But how much can this pause buy time for us? How is it benefiting us?
It's probably giving Singapore some space at the G2G level, the government-to-government level, to engage with the United States. We're seeing news flow coming out of Washington that Singapore is doing that proactively. Mind you that Singapore has very deep relationship, investment-related, jobs-related, military cooperation-related, deep relationship with the United States, and also a long-standing free trade agreement. Under the aegis of that, Singapore should not be treated as a country that has, quote unquote, cheated the United States or taken advantage of it, because none of those is absolutely, totally resemble anything from the truth. So Singapore, I think at this moment, the best that Singapore can do is use these 90 or 80 days that's left to make Singapore's case that it has always been a good partner of the US and it deserves that reciprocity. If the US chooses to go its own way and treat the entire world with a tariff mode, it's a fate that Singapore would have to succumb to, as the rest of the world would, but that's down the road. For the time being, there is still room for engagement.
How can, very quickly, Mr. Baig, how can Singapore use this pause as well, this time, to work and cooperate with its Asian neighbors?
So in terms of dealing with the Asian neighbors, we've already seen Singapore nudge its ASEAN colleagues to form an ASEAN-specific view and not become fragmented in their dealings with the United States. I think the fact that under the aegis of Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, Singapore has joined its ASEAN brethren in creating as free a market as possible for goods trade and have made tremendous progress toward making services, movement of capital, movement of labor more seamless, tells you that the region does have the potential to speak with one voice in terms of standing up for trade, freedom of movement of goods and capital, which is a positive sum game. Everybody wins with trade being entrenched in the global order. A trade war is a lose-lose proposition. It hurts ASEAN, it hurts the United States. There'll be no winners from this if this trade war keeps on intensifying. I think that's the thing that Singapore needs to do to create a common ground of common voices within the region. The region can speak with one tone when it comes to dealing with the United States.
All right, Dr. Goh, let's bring you into this conversation here. DPM Gan outlined 3 ways the task force will support businesses and workers. But what exactly will these measures need to entail? What are you hoping to see?
Well, I think 2 things. First, I think it's really support for the SMEs. So in Singapore, SMEs, they actually account for like 70% of the total workforce employment. And in particular, SMEs in the import-export business, they are likely to be most impacted by these trade disruptions. These businesses, they usually have like longer trade credit terms. So they are more likely than not to face cash flow issues. So I do hope to see some form of monetary support. It could be in this form of tax cuts, subsidies, or like incentive schemes that we saw during COVID-19. Just really to help these SMEs buy time that's critically needed for them to navigate this rapidly changing landscape. Help them find solutions, ensure their survival, and at the same time continue employment of the employees. Second, I think it's really trade. So with the past few decades, the prosperous, I think Singapore, we might forget that Singapore, we are actually a very small nation state with no natural resource. So trade is our lifeblood. We are highly dependent on trade. We export high value added goods. We import daily necessities. So I do look forward to seeing more diversification of trade routes by the government.
And the task force states the need to enter new markets and diversify supply chains, as you mentioned. But what sectors stand to benefit from such a move?
Right. So naturally, it will be as I mentioned, the businesses in the import-export sectors. But if you want to be more precise, specific, I think we first have to look at the top exports that Singapore has to the US. So these are like your biomedical, pharmaceutical, your precision engineering, semicon chips. So companies that are involved in this supply chain of these products will probably be impacted the most by the tariffs. And at the same time, Singapore manufacturers that are exporting components to China, which are then getting exported to the US, the demand for these components will likely be dampened. So these companies that are likely to be most directly or indirectly impacted by the tariffs will naturally see the greatest benefit from the government's exploration of new trade routes, that strategy.
Having said all of this, we just heard from the World Trade Organization. It has sharply cut its forecast for global merchandise trade from solid growth to a decline today. Mr. Baig, what is your outlook on the trade environment here in Asia?
89% of global trade happens outside the United States. So the world is not going to disappear tomorrow if trade with the United States is curtailed substantially. But I concur with the WTO's analysis that in the short term, that paralyzing impact of the uncertainty will curb trade. And the attempts that we are going to make to find alternative markets, to have deeper trade among nations outside of the United States, I call it TOTAS, trade outside the US, I think it'll take time. We have relied on one set of systems and rules for many, many decades. We're not going to be able to recalibrate to a new reality very quickly, there will need to be some degree of accountability of that frictional cost. And that's where the public sector comes in to smooth the cycle, to help us ride the storm. But I'm quite confident that WTO's bearish forecast notwithstanding, the space for trade and gains from trade with the US or outside the US will remain a viable source of profitable endeavors for years and decades to come. We're going through a big storm, a lot of uncertainty. This too shall pass.
All right, Dr. Goh, earlier we touched on some of the longer-term strategies and responses, right? But what about the immediate challenges? How should the task force provide short-term support, such as job creation and job security?
So I think it really have to look at, as mentioned, the sectors that are most impacted are these import-export businesses, apart from the others. Their trade credit terms are usually longer than most. So because of that, I think cash flow would be an issue. Chances are they might have receivables that's outstanding. In light of that, I think being able to provide some sort of short-term financing might be helpful, or at the same time providing them with some sort of like job support incentive scheme, as what we saw in COVID-19, wage support scheme that we saw in COVID-19. I think schemes like this will really help our SMEs, in particular the ones in the import-export sector, the ones who are most affected, by the time that they need to really manage this crisis, for them to find the solutions.
Dr. Goh, any hopeful prospects for the future?
Well, as I always share with my students, I think with every threat comes an opportunity. I think if Singapore is able to manage this new challenge well, it could actually be an opportunity for us to really better position ourselves on the global trades pecking order, putting us in a better position than we are today.
All right, Dr. Goh, Mr. Beck, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. That was Dr. Goh Jing Rong, Assistant Professor of Economics at the Singapore Management University, and Timur Beck, Chief Economist at DBS. Thank you, gentlemen.